Hello and welcome to What the F Just Happened Today, your essential guide to the daily shock and awe in national politics. I'm Joe Amditas. Let's get to it. It's Friday, November 12th, 2021. Welcome to day 297. A federal grand jury indicted Steve Bannon on charges of contempt of Congress for refusing to comply with a subpoena from the House committee investigating the January 6th Capitol riot. Bannon faces one contempt count for his refusal to appear for a deposition and another for his refusal to produce documents to the congressional investigators. This according to a statement from the Justice Department. Attorney General Merrick Garland said the indictment reflects the DOJ's steadfast commitment to ensuring that the department adheres to the rule of law. If convicted, Bannon could face up to a year behind bars and a fine of up to $100,000. Law enforcement expects Bannon to self-surrender on Monday and appear in court that afternoon. Mark Meadows also refused to appear for a deposition before the January 6th committee, setting up a potential criminal referral to the DOJ for his contempt of Congress. Meadows' attorney says the former White House chief of staff remains under the instructions of Trump to not comply with the House subpoena on claims of executive privilege. Biden, however, has refused to invoke executive privilege for Trump officials and records in the House's inquiry. Committee Chairman Benny Thompson said Meadows' willful noncompliance would force the Select Committee to, quote, consider invoking contempt of Congress procedures, end quote, that could result in a criminal referral to the Justice Department, as well as the possibility of a civil action to enforce the subpoena. Meanwhile, a federal appeals court temporarily blocked the National Archives from turning over Trump's White House records to the January 6th committee, a day before the committee was set to receive the first batch. On Tuesday, a lower court ruled that Biden can waive Trump's claim of executive privilege over the documents, saying that a former president's claim to executive power to withhold records from Congress after leaving office does not continue in perpetuity. Less than an hour after the ruling, Trump filed a notice of appeal. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit then granted a temporary injunction while it considered Trump's request to delay the release of documents and to maintain the status quo pending the appeal. The court will hear arguments on November 30th. Trump also justified his supporters' chants to hang Mike Pence during the Capitol riot, saying that it was common sense and that Pence was well protected. Trump defended the chants, telling ABC News' Jonathan Karl during an interview for Karl's new book that people were very angry that Pence hadn't overturned the election. Trump then repeated his baseless claims that the 2020 presidential election result was fraudulent. Moving on, House Democrats introduced a resolution to censure Republican Paul Gosar for tweeting an altered video that depicted him killing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and swinging two swords at Biden. In a statement, Democrats said, quote, for a member of Congress to post a manipulated video on his social media accounts depicting himself killing Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and attacking President Biden is a clear-cut case for censure. For that member to post such a video on his official Instagram account and use his official congressional resources in the House of Representatives to further violence against elected officials goes beyond the pale, end quote. The Arizona Republican has defended the video as a symbolic fight over immigration policy and the battle for the soul of America. Violent threats against lawmakers, meanwhile, are on track to double this year. Meanwhile, top political officials in the Trump White House repeatedly tried to block public health warnings and guidance from the CDC last year when it comes to the coronavirus pandemic. This according to newly released documents from the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Crisis. The emails and transcripts detail how in the early days of the pandemic, Trump and his allies in the White House blocked briefings and interviews with CDC officials, attempted to alter public safety guidance, and instructed agency officials to destroy evidence that might be construed as political interference. Several interviews also described efforts by Trump appointees to alter or influence the CDC's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly report to better align with the White House's more optimistic messaging about the state of the pandemic. Moving on, Biden nominated Robert Califf to lead the FDA despite his ties to the pharmaceutical industry. Califf previously led the agency in 2016 and 2017 and has long been a consultant to drug companies. If confirmed by the Senate, Califf would oversee an agency that is responsible for more than $2.8 trillion worth of food, medical products, and tobacco. Joe Manchin and Richard Blumenthal both voted against Califf's nomination in 2016 and have signaled their opposition again over concerns about his ties to the drug industry and the FDA's track record on opioids. The FDA has been without a Senate-confirmed administrator since Biden took office. And finally, a record 4.4 million Americans voluntarily quit their jobs in September, according to a Labor Department report. The number of people quitting in September constituted 3% of the U.S. workforce, which was up from the previous record set in August when 4.3 million people quit their jobs, or about 2.9% of the workforce. The number of available jobs, meanwhile, has topped 10 million for 4 consecutive months. Prior to the pandemic, the record was 7.5 million job openings. That's all for now. You can find the links and sources for all of these stories on the main website. And as always, visit whatthefjusthappenedtoday.com for the latest news and headlines. Until next time, I'm Joe Anditas.